All right. Happy Sunday. This is Daryl James, and you've joined The Bridge. So, I'm going to get right to it. Today, what I wanted to deal with is the whole concept of black men enjoying patriarchy, which every time I hear it sounds so extremely stupid that it's hard for me to respect the person who says it. But what I also know when I hear people start to talk about patriarchy, I know that number one, they don't know what patriarchy means, and they have no idea how this country was founded, what it was founded upon, what was going on. All they know is, hey, they had some slaves and they don't like black people. But there's some things that you need to know about the founding of this nation and about why it was important for white people to define themselves as white people, as a group that is superior to black people, and why the whole patriarchy situation came to even exist. Because it wasn't about black um, men dominating black women. So, first off, let me give you the actual definition of patriarchy. Patriarchy is a system of society in which the um, men hold the power and women are largely excluded from it, and that society is largely, or community is largely, organized along patriarchal lines. And so patriarchy includes having men in predominating roles of political leadership, moral authority, social privilege, and control of property. Now, we know that that exists in America for white people, but that has nothing to do with black people. And so I'll get to that later on. Let's go all the way back. Let's get in the Wayback Machine and go all the way back. Let's go back to the late 1500s, early 1600s, because they really didn't have that brutal, savage institution as slavery in full force across the land. Largely, we were dealing with indentured servitude. So when they came over here from those European countries to found this nation, it's important to know that they sent a lot of their criminals, and they also sent a lot of people from the insane asylums. So they just basically were like, hey, if you're going to the new world and you're going to try to create a new country, it's going to be rough, it's going to be really, really bad. Take all these criminals and crazy people with you. It's also important to note that it was mostly men who came over here. I'll tell you why that's important. Let's put a pin in it. I'll tell you why that's important in a minute. So, since we were dealing with people who were largely indentured servants, including some of the black people who were over here, these were people who could eventually buy their freedom or who eventually were free because indentured servitude was only for a specific period of time. And then it was like a prison sentence. So let's say that you harmed someone's family. Well, then you became an indentured servant to them to replace that person you harmed for a period of time, or did specific tasks, and that's what indentured servitude was. The problem is that when you started having Asians and blacks, non-whites, who were coming up out of indentured servitude and becoming free, they were doing a number of things which was problematic for the nations who sent people over here to figure things out. The first thing that they were doing is that they started to own land. They started to amass wealth. Now, the other groups, the groups of whites who were sent here from Portugal and Spain and the UK, were holding or sending wealth back to the colonizers. That's what they were doing. So the colonizers were benefiting. They spent a lot of money to send people over here to carve this new world out, and they were getting a return on their investment by getting money and holding the deeds to property. So when you had people who were not beholden to the colonizers who were starting to amass wealth and amass property, sending nothing back, holding nothing back, that became a problem. It became a huge problem. And something else they were doing. Remember, I said there was a shortage of women. So it wasn't some spooky shit where the black, freed black men were like, "Ooh, let me get some white meat." White meat. They basically, just like the Asians and poor whites who were becoming free, were looking at the only women that were available, and so that became a problem because the colonizers were, in fear of perpetuating their own existence because there weren't enough women to do that with. So they had to start figuring out a way to create a delineation between themselves and the people who were still elite, had an allegiance to the colonizers. And that came in the 16th century with a man called Nathaniel Bacon, who's, I don't even know if he was related to, but he is not the same as Sir Francis Bacon. Nathaniel Bacon created a huge, huge rebellion. And here's an important point, too. Uh, the Native Americans, the original Native Americans, were Africans. And then we saw that some other people popped up and said, "We are the Native Americans," and they were not African. They were pretty close to the white people who came. They looked like them and had a little mixture, maybe, of African, but they separated themselves from the Africans who were also Native Americans. But by this time, they had separated themselves and they had tribes and nations, and they were pretty much participating in wealth and domination right along with the original colonizers. So Nathaniel Bacon organized a group of mostly poor whites, poor blacks, wealthy blacks, and slaves, because now they were starting to enslave people. And he organized a huge rebellion, which was successful, except for the fact that he ended up dying of a fever. So his rebellion fell apart. So here's what came next. So, of course, slavery became the law of the land because they needed to do two things. The biggest thing that they needed to do is to make sure that they could control the wealth and control the property and everything that was coming from the New World. The colonizers needed to do that. So they decided to create a group called white people, right? Not that people weren't saying you're white and you're black, whatever, back then, but it just didn't have the same significance. But by creating a group here in the New World, that group being called white people, and telling them that they had privilege and domination and that they were better than the other groups, including Asians, Africans, and those Native American people, you basically then created an allegiance, and an alliance with people who would then be loyal to the colonizers. So that's why that was important for them to call themselves white. And we see that all the way through today. That let's take the Republicans, for example. You had all these two teeth cousin rapers who are loyal to the Republicans, loyal to people who have wealth and power, and they believe that they're better than black people, but the reality of it is they're not, and in many cases financially they're worse off than black people or just the same. But by creating and holding on to that group known as white people, now the white what do I want to say, the upper crust white people can use those stupid ass poor white people against black people, and that continues to today. So now let's talk about patriarchy. So patriarchy came about. Remember, I said that they had two problems. They had the problem of holding on to their wealth, but they also had a problem of being able to continue themselves, being able to be fruitful and multiply. And so they needed to be able to control the women. So here's what was happening: because they weren't very many women in the New World at that time. You had some savage people who would just roll around. You find a woman and you rape the shit out of her, beat the shit out of her. And, they're female, so, they couldn't protect themselves. It's not like they were in huge groups with guns, and, they were subject to the whim of a lot of savage people who were raping and harming them. But what they were also subject to is the whim of free blacks, free Asians who had money and power, who could give them two things: provision and protection. So when they created the whole white hierarchy, by defining the group known as white and declaring that group superior, now they could create, and they did create an agreement. And this is where patriarchy came from. They created an agreement with white women. We will provide for you and we will protect you if you give us your allegiance. So if you marry us and have babies for us, then we'll make sure that you're not raped. We'll make sure that we can protect you. Because if they married whites or blacks or Asians who were free, whites could still come and harm them, rape them, and you know do whatever other savagery that they would want to do. Um, so by creating this patriarchal system, now white women were more inclined to be with white men because they knew, okay, these guys are coming into power. They're going to hold on to power. They're going to run things. If I'm with them, I can be provided for and I can be protected. So the reason why all of that is important, all of that history is important to know about the founding of the nation, is because that lets you know why patriarchy as a system was created, who it was created for, and who it still benefits. Now, the real problem for me is when I hear some of these dumbass black people who, especially dumbass black women, who say, yeah, black men enjoy patriarchy right along with white men. You sound so ignorant. It's hard for me to respect you as a sentient being. If you look at America, you see two things. Number one, you see the evaporation of power in the black community, but you also see the snatching, the erosion of power from the black man, particularly over the last 4 decades, and intentionally so. If we know anything about the black community, the first thing that we look at today, not yesterday, today, the first thing that we look and say most of these black households are headed by females. If we say black women are doing the majority of raising of the children for whatever reason, whether they've pushed the man out, the man left, died, whatever the case is, if we say the majority of the homes in the black community are run by black women, we are basically saying that the black community is the majority a matriarchy. That's what we're saying. And so when we start to look at, and this isn't about, oh, I hate black women, you did this, you did that. This is It's just what it is. History is. You can be mad at it or whatever, but it is history. Facts are what they are. You can be mad at them, but they are what they are. So, if in fact, let's go back to the definition of patriarchy and flip it, because it's the same thing with matriarchy, specifically when it comes to, pay attention, determining political leadership, moral authority, social privilege, and control of property. That means that we're a matriarchy. And you know who knows it? We may not know it as black people, but white people know it. You know who really knows it because they used it? The Democratic Party. They know, which is why they made such a huge appeal to black women. They made an appeal to black women that here we're going to put some black women in place and tell you that you're powerful and tell you it's all about you and it's not about black men. Black men need to get it together. They put a system in place. Welfare. Let's go back to the founding of welfare. Welfare wasn't just designed to help the family, but they literally had rules in place, some of them which are still in place, that said you can only continue to get this money if you make sure that there's no man around. So there's some things in place that specifically help to bolster the existence of a matriarchy in the Black community, but also its continuance. And as I said, if we look at what the Democratic Party is doing right now, some of us are like, oh, it's just black girl magic. That's all it is. Actually, it's not. If black people are 13% of the population and black women, roughly are edge us out by maybe two percentages, then out of 44 million, then we say that 21 million are black men and 22 million are black women, 23 million are black women, right? Out of 300 million people in this country, the Democratic Party told you that 23 million determined the election. That's a problem. Let me do the numbers again. Out of 300 million people in this country, the Democratic Party told you, black women, who are 23 million people, that you made the difference in this election, and you ate it up and you rocked your pearls and your chucks and you said, yeah, we saved the election. And I don't know, you even let that bastard Barack speak recklessly to us and say, yeah, I think black men supported Trump because they love the hip hop sensibilities, which I don't even know what the connection is. It's not like Trump is a hip hop artist. It was Barack who was rocking with, Beyonce and Jay-Z rocking with the rappers, right? But let me go back to my point. My point is that matriarchy has been supported in the black community, and it even has been used as a tool by the Democrats to further the division between black men and black women, and to further support their goals and to further support their public appearance. Because again, it is black women who are the majority of the head of households in the black community. So for anyone to turn around and say the black community is a patriarchy, to turn around and say black men are enjoying patriarchy along with white men, you really have taken leave of your senses. Like that means that you don't understand patriarchy. It means you don't understand what's happening in this community. And then it's really bad that when someone like me tells the truth, I already know what some people are going to say. Oh, you hate black women. No, I hate lies, and I love the truth. And so these things that I've discussed today are important because it lets us know, and I'll deal with this in further discussions. It lets us know what's really going on between black men and black women, and it lets us know because these things that I'm about to say are fairly new, where black women are saying, "Oh, I need a provider." Black men no longer protect us. So if you are saying that you want a provider and you want to be protected, guess what you're asking for? You're asking for patriarchy. Let me say it again for the cheap seats. Black women, when you ask black men to be providers, and when you say that you need to be protected, you are asking for patriarchy. Those are two of the basic reasons why patriarchy was created in this land, right? And so that's important because at some point, black people got to do some history and understand who we are. But black women have to really take a good look at what they've done. Not all of you, but specifically black women who make these accusations against black men. It's like what you've done is you've taken the white woman's history and you've grafted it onto yourself, and now you're pretending that black men are white men. And it just doesn't work. And that's why we have so many problems. What we need you to do, black women, is to view yourself as black women and view us as black men. Place everything in a historical perspective so that you can understand we're not your enemy. There is no huge patriarchy in the black community. And I need you to also stop quoting Brother Malcolm. Malcolm said that the most unprotected group in America was the black woman. He did not mean that black men were in derelict of duty in terms of protecting black women. What he meant was that there are a lot of black women who they just, for whatever reason, aren't with black men. And when they're not in the company of black men, The laws of the land don't protect them the way the laws of the land protect everybody else. That's what he meant. The laws of the land do not protect black women the way the laws of the land protect everybody else. So please don't lie on Brother Malcolm. It's not that black men don't protect black women. Black men protect black women that they care about, and they protect black women who are in their presence. So let's stop making shit up. So anyway, so that's why I wanted to do a history lesson today to let people know where white people came from, why it was important for them to define themselves as white, and where patriarchy came from, and why it's still being used as a tool of division within the black community. Most of what we have, black people, that divides us from each other politically, socially, and across gender lines has nothing to do with us. It's propaganda that comes from other communities, particularly the white community. And the Democratic Party currently, I mean, I know you guys are glad Biden and Harris won, and that's, was a good thing. And hopefully they'll, do some things to make the country better. But at the same time, they played into the weaknesses that we have between black men and black women. Some of the same black women who called Kamala Harris a bitch and a hoe in 2019 started telling everybody in 2020 when Biden said, "That's my VP running mate, that's our sister," and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just saying be consistent. And I'm also saying pay attention and understand who these people are and watch what they're about to do because they're consistent, even if we're not. So anyway, I'm going to do another discussion later and talk about some of the specific issues that black men and women have that we can easily resolve by doing one thing: recognizing that it's bullshit. Most black men and most black men and most black women are looking for each other, want each other, love and respect each other. But we get used by propaganda. And most of us don't even know what propaganda is. So, anyway, if you're watching on YouTube, please, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and hit the notifications bell. If you're watching on Facebook, please like and share. And stay tuned for the next episode of The Bridge.